Shalom, introduce. My name is Yosua Mase, student M.Th Inti Makassar, Class A, subject of Theology English course. I will bring you an article entitled Hymn to Why Jesus Should Be Recognized as a Victim of Sexual Violence. The season of Lent is an invitation to the course and to anyone else who wishes to do so to reflect on the disturbing story of the torture and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth as described in the New Testament. It is one of the most widely known and often written stories in human history. Yet, despite being read and remembered so often, there is a part of the story which typically receives little attention and minimal discussion: the stripping of Jesus. The Me Too movement has highlighted the privilege of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other sexual abuses experienced by women and girls in many different forms. It has also exposed the common tendency to deny, dismiss, or minimize the significance and impact of this experience. The stripping of Jesus, with this in mind during this present Latin period, it seems especially appreciated to record the stripping of Jesus and to name it for what it was intended to be: a powerful display of humiliation and gender-based violence, which should be acknowledged as an act of sexual violence. And absurd, the idea that Jesus himself experienced sexual abuse might seem strange or shocking at first, but crucifixion was a supreme punishment, and the stripping and exposure of victim was not an accidental or incidental element. It was a deliberate action that the Romans used to humiliate and degrade those they wished to punish. It meant that the crucifixion was more than just physical. It was also a devastating emotional and psychological punishment. The convention in Christian art of covering Christ's nakedness on the cross with a loincloth is perhaps an understandable response to the intended indignity of Roman crucifixion, but this should not prevent us from recognizing that the historical reality would have been very different. This is not just a matter of correcting the historical record. If Jesus is named as a victim of sexual abuse, it could make a huge difference to who the curses engage with movements like Me Too and who they promote change in reader society. This could contribute significantly to positive change in many countries and especially in societies where the majority of people identify as Christian. Some victims might respond that stripping a prisoner might be a form of violence of abuse, but it is misleading to call this sexual violence or sexual abuse. Yet, if the purpose was to humiliate the captive and expose him to mockery by order, and if the stripping is done against his will and as way to shame him in public, then recognizing it as a form of sexual violence or sexual abuse seems amply justified. The way that the stripping of Vercingetorix, king of the Aphemy, is depicted in the first episode of the first series of the 8BU series Rome is an example of this. The skin highlights the vulnerability of the naked prisoner who is stripped and exposed in front of the assembled ranks of hostile Roman soldiers. The power and control of Roman power is contrasted with the vulnerability and forced submission of the prisoner. The skin also hint at the possibility of even greater sexual violence which might be in store. Combating stigma, Jesus' gender is central to readers' seeming unwillingness to recognize the sexual abuse to which he is subjected. Analysis of the gendering of nakedness by Margaret R. Miles demonstrate that we view male and female nakedness differently. In biblical art in the Christian West, Miles argues that the naked male body represents glorious athleticism, expressing spiritual as well as physical suffering. Sexual abuse thus form part of the narrative of masculinity inherent in representation of Jesus. Naked women, however, are immediately identified as sexual object. Seeing a woman being vertical stripping then might be more recognizably as sexual abuse than the stripping of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark. If Christ was a female figure, we would hesitate to recognize her order as sexual abuse. Some present-day Christians are still reluctant to accept that Jesus was a victim of sexual violence and seem to consider sexual abuse as an exclusively female experience. We may not want to dream all the disturbing indignity of crucifixion for the will year, but it's not right to forget above incompletely either. The sexual abuse of Jesus is a missing part of Passion and Easter story reading. It's appropriate to recognize Jesus as a victim of sexual violence, to address the continuing stigma for those who've experienced sexual abuse, especially men. Lean over a period in which the stark reality of crucifixion might be recounted and connected to the important question that movements like Me Too are raising for the course and for wider society. Once we acknowledge the sexual abuse of Jesus, perp will be more willing to acknowledge sexual abuse in our own context. In this article explain to us that there are things that hinder the pre-estate period, namely violence or sexual harassment, where Jesus was forbidden stripped naked as a form of humiliation before Jesus was crucified. However, the tendency for people to think that it will only be challenged sexual violence if it only happens or is experienced by women, because in our opinion, if a man opens his clothes to reveal his body, he will be challenged a bodybuilding or athletic. But we do not state that Jesus' clothes were removed by force and not of Jesus' own will. We have the view that male and female nudity are different, so we think that the torment that Jesus experienced was not sexual violence. However, we need to know that whatever form of violence it takes to under someone by force is a form of sexual violence, so this can be a lesson for use today. Thank you.